Wu-Tang.
Well, I have really loved this symposium because I've gotten to see that you really are real people, and that's really good. I would like to introduce Sumaira to all of you, who is a high school student, um, and she's one of the authors of the book that you saw yesterday. And um, obviously, she's related to someone you know.
Yes.
Um, her mother is Walkyria. uh, um, but welcome, Sumaira. One of the things that I would like to do is um, let you know that I really, really, really want to come in person to your organizations sometime beginning in October to do at least a 4-hour grant writing workshop in English, and if you desire, a 4-hour grant writing workshop in Spanish. Because if you read my bio, you know that I'm fluent in Spanish. Shoshanda's backstage. Let me tell her to go. Shoshanda, can you please communicate with Shanice and have her let you on? For some reason, I don't have that capability. So, thank you. So that is what I want to let you know, that, and this is no cost. This is no hotel. I mean, you may want to give me a sandwich. Jerome, you're on mute.
I said, yeah. I said, I'm sure we're gonna have to feed you.
Well, as we used to say in Rochester, there used to be a mafioso character that said that had this front, small furniture shop. He says, "Come on by and give me a sandwich and a cup of coffee." So please, please, please communicate with, I feel funny saying this, but communicate with your network.
Sure.
Evenings, weekend, Saturday, Sunday, 7 o'clock in the morning, whatever you feel, whatever you believe. If I'm going to do it in English, I would like to do it exclusively in English. Okay. If you want me to give a Spanish session, I would like to give it exclusively in Spanish, because I've done bilingual workshops before, and it gives me a headache. So going between English and Spanish. I mean, I know the Sumaira could care less because she's totally bilingual, but for those of us who are Spanish as a second language, it just gets. But I do want you to think about that, because we have talked a lot about technical assistance, and Mike, if you want the Creole Haitian community version of the workshop, then we're going to need a translator, because je m'appelle Paul. That's all I can do.
We can get someone from the community, I'm sure.
In French. Hello, Shoshanda.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? I was just telling the group that I really want to come in person to your location, wherever that might be, and do at least a 4-hour workshop in English And if you want, I can do a 4-hour workshop in Spanish because I'm pretty intelligible in Spanish, aren't I, Sumaira? You can understand my Spanish, can't you?
Yeah, for sure. You speak Spanish very, very well.
Oh, okay, there. So a witness, a testimony.
So Paul, are you going to put together a nice little syllabus on what you're going to cover and how you're going to cover it? Because that's what we're going to. I would use that document to help market the idea.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jerome. And I can do anything you want. I mean,
Well, that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want a syllabus. I want to know what you're going to talk about.
I can send you the slides from the 3 workshops we're doing.
That's the easy way. I tell my students don't do that. You gotta write up the summary. I want the slides too, but I want you to write up the summary.
Okay,
of course.
Here's one idea.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at an RFP, and we can
No. I want you to do the work. That sounds like you're giving me work to do. You came up with this idea. You're gonna have to follow it through.
Okay.
I will come up with conclusion.
I will come up with an RFP, and we can actually write the grant.
Right, but that's the outcome. I'm talking about the process.
Okay.
Like what's going to be discussed in the process. No, honestly, because and this is a good part of the conversation, is that we're getting people contacting us now about services.
Yeah.
And naturally, we don't know what the scope of our services are. However, it's absolutely an opportunity for us to have some meaningful thing that they can do, such as, participate in a workshop like this, right?
Yeah.
But what I don't want to do is to conflate what we're talking about with the needs of what somebody may be anticipating. They may have something else on their minds. So it's easier and probably more efficient that we tell them exactly what this is.
Okay.
And if they need something else, then we say, hey, well, we'll have to address that something else later.
Okay, I understand.
But I don't want folks showing up and people walking away like, man, that's not what I thought it was going to be.
Okay. I will develop a curriculum.
Thank you, sir. I know it may be challenging, but that this is something that's important for us to talk about. You know, when we talk about being hubs, what we're really saying is that we're in a community. We're with neighbors and friends and colleagues. We have to live with our colleagues, neighbors, and friends.
Yeah.
So how we treat them is real important.
Yeah.
What we promise them is real important, because you can go away. I'm still stuck here. And so I can't, they'll be at my door every day, like reminding me that I've sold them something that they didn't want.
I hear you, and I will comply.
Thank you, sir. That's all. I knew we could get there. I had to just nudge you a little bit, Paul.
Yeah. But I'm going to send you the slides also.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think we all would like to see with the presentation, but that's a great interim thing to do while we're developing our bigger scope of work, to be able to have these little workshops. Uh-huh. As a matter of fact, I have an event. This is perfect. I have an event already on the books on the end of October, last Saturday in October. This will fit in perfectly. So I'm going to be the first person to try to lock you in to a date.
Great.
For this.
As long
we're
as
doing a project called Overbrook Community Science, where there's an environmental education grant, and we're working on some real interesting ways to engage the community through focus groups. But we very intentionally has sub-awardees, universities who are sub-awardees, to structure the focus group for us. And we promised all of the participants that we were going to report out on the outcomes of all of the focus group work.
Cool.
And part of that's going to happen on the 28th, when we did tell them that there was going to be some additional activity going on the 28th around education and next steps, et cetera. So this would fall in quite nicely.
Good.
Yeah.
The-
So October the 28th, I'm putting it down, and we'll follow up with an email or so. So Paul for a presentation on grant presentation.
Okay, and the only day that I'm not available is Saturday, October 21st.
I don't need you 21st. I need you 28th.
No, I'm telling the others.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just teasing. That's my humor.
No,
Don't
that's
get me-
fine. That's fine.
That's my humor.
You know,
My
and,
way of-
and something I might offer on this discussion is that, in just getting something together for the proposals for match with the community, theory is really great. It can lay a great foundation for something, but to actually provide a situation where perhaps in a workshop there could be, say, a mock RFP question, or something where there could be a hands-on doing of actually getting some bit of a proposal. I know obviously it can't be a full out 18-page proposal that we're going to write in this workshop, but if there's a way to get people hands-on writing and get real-time feedback or real-time help developing at least an answer to one question or the thoughts for a project, I feel like that could be really, really helpful.
Well, Mike, I appreciate that comment, and what I would like to say is that, having gone through 2 grant writing workshops, it reminds me that riding a bike is different than being told how to ride a bike. And so I think it's a great exercise for people to be told ahead of time, think about the project that you want to fund, and we'll talk about how to develop a title for your project, how to develop an abstract, how to develop a logic model for your project. Without expecting them to write in a very creative and scientific and compelling manner, but just to put the ideas down, because the ideas are what is difficult. It's not making sentences out of the ideas. I mean, if you put down the ideas, I can write it. If you don't put the ideas down, I can't write it. I mean, the way I write is I put ideas down and then I think, well, how am I going to write it? So I think it's great to actually develop an outline of a grant for people, and then they see, wow, we can do it. Because you don't need a PhD, you don't need a master's degree in health, you don't need to be a Pulitzer Prize writing author to put together a proposal. I mean, it's you just need to know what needs to go in what section and put it there. And I mean, I think the best grant development workshop is doing that.
So Paul, are in your coursework, do you go through a section that discusses the preparation for eligibility to apply, how to register for grants.gov, what does it take to have an EIN number?
Yeah.
What does it take to have a unique identifier number? All of those things that are pretty standard for the federal grant submissions. Do you go through those things too?
Yeah, that was basically the content of our first grant writing workshop.
Right.
How to get into grants.gov.
Sick.
What to do if you're working under a fiscal sponsor.
Right.
Registering for your system award management, SAM. Getting
Okay.
a UEI. I mean, what you
Right.
can do before you're even developing the proposal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great because I can imagine that there's going to be people at different stages
Yeah.
of development.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, and I've told people already, who've attended the workshops, by the time the symposium is over, you all should have registered in grants.gov and SAM.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And if you need help, I'll give you Mike Payon's email address. He'll help you.
I will reply with Paul's email address.
Because this is a peer-to-peer mentoring workshop. No, who did you help, Mike?
A community in with Seaford. It was a project for Seaford.
Yeah.
And so they'd never written a grant proposal before, the folks that we worked with. So it was, starting from zero, a lot of hand holding involved there, but it was helpful nonetheless. They learned a lot from it. You did it a second time. That was the same way I had to do it the first time, right? It was blood, sweat, and tears with Jacoby, until 4 a.m, and then he came in last minute and did some, savior stuff to try to, fix what was not, what wasn't in shape for submission. But that's what gave us the confidence to be able to apply for things on our own later.
What's weird though, Mike? It's like getting no is heartbreaking, right? But in a strange kind of way, it's great to get the no on the front end. Then once you get it, you're like real excited. It's like I finally broke through. But I don't know what it's like to have gotten it the first time out. You don't really, I don't know if that gives you a false sense of confidence, So
that's true. That's true. And I think, a federal application being much different than a small application from some foundation.
Yeah, that's true.
We had done that for years prior to doing federal, right, for the first time. And federal was like, we had a fake sense of confidence from being successful with national grants. And then we see these federal grants with 50-page RFPs and guidelines, and we were like, oh, right. Goodness, how are we going to,
get through that?
Yeah.
I have a question though for our colleagues here. Samira, did I pronounce your name right? You're on mute.
Sumaira.
Sumaira.
Can you talk a little bit about the inspiration for your book? I did borrow a copy from Paul.
And they stole it back. They stole it back to Rome.
And then I looked at my back and it was gone.
They stole it back.
What was the inspiration? Because I had some kids, some young folks here do a comic book on lead, and we fashioned actually the characters. They actually looked like the kids. Their faces, they were superheroes, but their faces looked like the young people who actually created the characters. What inspired you and your team to come up with this book?
A little bit about the inspiration. In the program, we were already learning about environmental justice and climate change and topics related to environmental health. But during around like the third week of us doing the program, we decided that we were going to start writing a book. And at first we didn't know what it was going to be about and like what was going to be like the main character and all of that. But in the end, we decided to go with littering, and storm drainage, because that's something that, a lot of people can relate to. I know a lot of people who don't know a lot about the environment, environmental health. there are a lot of people, you know, who do littering, you know, and things like that.
Right.
And I think it's something that everyone could really relate to,
Sure.
as well as due to, you know, the consequences of them littering, you know, maybe their events would get canceled or something they were really looking forward to would get canceled because of that. And so that's why we picked that, because it would be very relatable for young children as well as, you know, adults as well.
Are you thinking about doing a whole series of these kind of books?
Yeah, it's definitely in the works. Like, we've talked about it, and all of the kids in the program, you know, they really agreed to it and they were really excited for it. So I think, yeah, we'll definitely be continuing, and hopefully we can make a series of this.
Yeah, that would be so cool. Because
Yeah,
the young folks that are here, they were looking at a variety of environmental topics: air, water, land, food, and doing a whole series around the different topics, creating these interesting characters, you know. And they were very intentional too about making sure that the characters look like the kids that they see in the neighborhood every day. And that was like important to them, right? To try to get that type of diversity into the narrative.
Yeah. We also have, you know, it's kind of a special character there. His name is, you know, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, we saw you made him a little chubby. I don't know if Dr. Wilson took offense to it or not.
Yeah, the story behind it is actually really funny, because we had originally designed Mr. Wilson to be called Mr. Smith. And so not only did he also kind of look like, you know, my father, his last name is Mr. Smith, as well as he looks a lot like Mr. Smith. So we were like, this is probably just a copy and paste of my dad. So we're like, get something, you know, a bit more relatable and put, you know, Mr. Wilson. And then when we had like the reveal of the book, Paul and Walkiria had mentioned Dr. Wilson. So that was really
Did you tell your dad on the side, like, hey, Dad, this is really you?
Yeah, we had to, I think he's probably watching the stream right now, so he's probably finding out right now that it was inspired by him.
That's a big honor.
And Sumaira, who is the artist of the book your brother?
Yeah, he is.
He was there yesterday, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was yesterday? Good.
He was sitting next to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's really interested, you know, in art and drawing, things like that.
Well, I think that you all, Sumaira, should get in contact with Jerome's group, and maybe you can do something mutually.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what I find interesting, we have a whole program here at Overbrook called Visual Literacy Program. It's a visual literacy program, and we've learned years ago that, you know, well, as an educator, you know that people learn differently. Everyone learns differently. Some people you can talk to, some people need to visualize, some people, particularly the younger you are, the more you like to touch kinesthetically, right? You want to feel and touch. But more importantly, if you can visualize something and also have some narrative associated with it, it's a very complimentary way to you know, form ideas. You know, it's a very important strategy for us to reach particularly young audiences. So we started out originally with a coloring book, and the idea was that would engage an adult with a young person, right? So the young person plus adult, because that's how you know, do color books. It's usually like adult facilitates it. They may throw the crayons out and leave you with it, but they are involved in some level. Insectic toxins and litter. We do litter also, and it was like, oh, okay, well, you know, they'll have to read it at some point too. So it was like a subversive way of getting information to the parent, you know, under the guise of it being a coloring book. But then what happened when we started putting out the idea of a coloring book, this is a free like intel. Then the coloring book people started coming to us and like, well, here's what a coloring book's supposed to be like, right? We weren't authentic enough. And we had superhero characters, and they were like, if you don't establish the colors of your characters, then the kids don't know what colors to replicate. It took years for people to know that like Spider-Man was red and black. So you assume that when you start out that they'll know the colors, but you have to like inundate them with the colors. So we said, okay, let's not do the coloring book first. Let's make sure we push the book so you know what colors the uniforms of the characters are. Then by the time you go with the character coloring book, you already have established the colors. That's just a little something that the professionals sort of beat us up about. They kind of undecided.
Yeah, for our book, like it's also kind of a coloring book.
Oh, really?
You can also use it
Nice.
normally, like read it as a book. But we wanted to. We at first didn't come up with the issue of having to establish like specific colors for the character, as like in the process of making the character designing, we had already picked the colors and the color scheme. So what we did is that in the back of the book, you have already a colored version of the character, so you can have a basis. But you know, the kids still have that freedom to customize it to their will. If they want to give it some different colors, be more creative with it, then they can feel free to do that.
Oh, nice, very nice. And I remember Saladay Rashidi, right? She was earmarked as the new generation.
Sorry, I have a lag.
Huh?
She has a lag.
A lag?
Yeah.
Oh.
Can you guys hear me? I have a lag and my screen just went black. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Hear you.
I want to hear about your work.
Yes, it's Asada.
Asada, thank you.
So I am the environmental justice organizer for South Ward Environmental Alliance in Newark, New Jersey, and I came on in 2021. I manage our air quality monitoring project. And the first project I started working on was the Purple Air Monitors, and been working closely with the Siege team, and had some great experiences with some great people, and recently have been working very close with a vet to get the data from the monitors, and he puts together the charts so that we understand what we're looking at, and does the comparison to the EPA if how bad our air quality is. I worked with some other Siege members as well, and pretty much did the Purple Air Monitor installations myself. And we have about 10 monitors throughout the South Ward. Not all of them are actively uploading the data to the map because we do have some connectivity issues. However, we do have monitors with SD cards for the most part, and so we're still able to download the data, and we were able to show that data this past April for our annual environment summit that we have. And we were able to invite the community out and show them what we have been doing with the Purple Air Monitors. We also do a truck count every April and August. We go to 5 intersections in the South Ward, and for 3 hours of the day. So 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., and then 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. We're outside counting trucks. And we also bring out the air beam the second version. So those are only compatible with the Androids, unfortunately. But for the most part, we are able to provide everyone with a phone, and we have 2 people per location for the most part. Sometimes it's just one person, and that's a staff member. However, we just are outside counting the trucks at these intersections, and our highest truck count was in August of 2022. We counted over 7,000 trucks in total. So we're outside for 2 days and over 6 hours. And I mean, for those 6 hours, but spread between those 2 days, we counted over 7,000 trucks. And it's just really interesting to see how much truck traffic we have because we are the backyard and we have the airport as well as several industrial facilities, and we just experiencing all this cumulative impact, cumulative toxins, and we're just breathing all this every day. And the trucks make their wiggle. I grew up with our 2 brothers having asthma, and my second brother had it the worst, so he was always being hospitalized. And just seeing that impact on him and seeing that impact on the community, because our industrial facilities are located near where our senior citizens live. And so not only is it impacting their health, but it's also a safety hazard with them just even trying to cross the street. So we're really trying to advocate for, more electrified trucks, possible different truck routes, more safety solutions, possible crossing guards to help the seniors get across safely to the other side of the street. We lobby to make sure we have the ear of our local and state and national representatives because we want better for our people. And that's just a little bit of what I've been involved in.
So to ask a question both for Assata, I know Shonda's also doing some air monitoring in there. You folks also might be doing some air monitoring, but challenges, lessons learned from securing host locations. And I'm sure, I don't know if you probably have to get them on some kind of private property, right? The same way we do. What has been your experience with that, and how have you overcome some of the concerns from folks and been able to successfully find a lot of good sites?
Shonda?
So I partially heard.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, that's why she had a leg. That's why I was letting her.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. So I partially heard because, like I said, my computer has a lag for the monitors.
Not just pick the spots for the so to share a little insight from what we're doing on the Eastern Shore, which is a little bit different than probably an urban area or versus a rural area. So we have certain points of interest that we really will have a monitor around. At least I know in the work that me and Shonda are doing, some of it's associated with a trail camera, and on top of the monitoring. So, getting some folks to accept the responsibility of, having this on their property has been a challenge in some ways. And I just kind of wanted to hear, other people's experience with this and, how you've overcome some of those concerns from the owners of the properties where you're looking to place the monitors.
Hey, Mike, could you talk a little bit more about the trail camera and how you use it?
Yeah. So we're doing a study right now with there's minute by minute readings done by an air monitor, whereas we're also comparing that with minute by minute pictures from a trail camera, which is really important because you bring data to a policymaker, you bring data to a legislator, and you hear, well, how do you know that this is caused by X or Y? This could be anything. Right? And the trail camera is your way to say, no, every time we see this activity, we see problems on the monitor. And so we statistically associate that every time this is happening, it's causing an issue for our air pollution. And so we need to control this activity.
Right. Okay. Good. Makes sense. Because that was sort of tying into a question I was going to ask. Asada, is that when you were doing your traffic counts, were you seeing an equivalent spike in like PM2 on the air monitors? Was like, were you seeing a correlation in higher traffic volumes and the higher particulate matter readings on the monitors?
I'm sorry. Do you mind repeating your question? I had somebody talking to me on the side here.
Okay. Yeah, and I didn't know if it was for us. I was really thinking about Asada when I was saying it. Is that she was, I mean, very similar to what you're saying, getting the graphic depiction of the action of and the scientific evaluation of it, correlated, right? So when you see a spike in the particulate matter numbers, you also see a high traffic volume. You see a causation. So you're getting the visualization of the causation. And I was wondering, in that same respect, Asada, whether or not she was seeing the same thing with her work, whether or not the like the traffic counts. Say, for example, you get a peak, 7,000 cars total, but like, say if you got a peak volume at 5 o'clock, rush hour, where maybe 1,000 cars at a particular point. If a monitor's at that point, do you see it like spike along with the increased traffic? Does that make sense? She's on delay, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, we are able to see that correlation. And that's why it's helpful when Vivek is putting together the data so that we can see the purple air data, and then we compare it to the times that we're outside counting the trucks. We do see that correlation. We don't have the trail camera that you guys have, Michael. So that's really cool to have, to be able to know what's going on in that at that moment, because sometimes we're not able to see exactly get to that location at that time. But we do have community partners, and they have been accepting to host monitors, and sometimes they go on the map and they say, oh, our readings are high, can somebody come out and look at this, and maybe give us some understanding as to why this is happening, and placing the monitors in certain locations. We would go around asking certain people in hotspot areas that we know of, and we also have an air quality monitoring advisory board, which has several leaders of our community that just help inform us what they want to see based on this project, and how we make sure we relay the information to them, tell us how they're understanding it, so that we also can make sure that when we share the information with the community, that it's digestible for everyone. And we have locations. We have monitor at a hospital, at a park, at a children's center, at the International Longshoremen's Association building. We have one at a club, a church, and we have two at two firehouses as well. So a little spread out throughout the community, and just to make sure we're getting that data. And then we want to make sure that we have them in areas where children recreate and our elderly recreate, because they're the vulnerable population. So we want to make sure that we're tracking the air quality closest to them as well.
It's Is Empower DC doing any air monitoring?
Yeah, we have actually. We did a similar thing with the Purple Air monitors, particularly in several community members in Brentwood hosts them, and then we have one in Ivy City. And then as a result of some of the campaigning that we've been doing, DOE, the Department of Energy and Environment, did some testing in Ivy City, and now EPA is doing some testing in Ivy City, and so that's interesting. I'm going to see, I'm interested to see the results because my understanding is that they, have a lab that allows for a much broader range of pollutants and toxins to be identified, and so what they're doing right now is they have these canisters that they bring out so that there's a particular polluter in the neighborhood that is now reporting to EPA when they're running their facility. EPA comes and we help to line up about 5 or 6 homeowners in the neighborhood who would allow them to place then the canister on their property. They leave it out for the day and then they collect it. So this is a different model. And then we also had recently this opportunity to have Aclima come do some testing. You may have heard of Aclima. It's the company out of Oakland that has this electric vehicle with all of the monitors and sensors attached to it. And they do a study by driving through communities over the course of weeks or months and collect a number of data, including they can detect the methane gas leaks and, different things that some other testing might not identify. So they did a recent short study in Ivy City, Brentwood, and we're awaiting the results of that. But I think, what I'm a little concerned about right now with testing and monitoring is that, we want the data, yes, but what we really want is to change the conditions, right? That we're measuring. I don't want to say, I'm worried that we're at this point right now where the city, the government folks are open to the testing, but not really open to then. And sometimes the testing is used to diminish the community's complaints. Because, for instance, if it's within EPA limits, whatever the amount of pollutants is identified, and the EPA limits or whatever the limits are not strict enough, or they weren't designed with vulnerable populations in mind, that can be used then against us. And we did have that experience years ago. We were suing to stop the placement of a bus terminal in Ivy City, and we did some monitoring, collected data, and we were basically told it didn't exceed EPA levels, so it's okay. And again, this is part of the failure of our policies to be really protective of people who are facing cumulative impacts from multiple things, right? So I wonder if you guys have any thoughts about how do we move? Yes, let's have the data, but how do we move beyond data to real change?
See,
I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, so I had the great fortune to work on be a part of a work group on NEJAC, the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and the working group is studying the nature of cumulative impacts, and it's a very complicated process on some level, and then some other levels is not complicated at all. And what's intriguing to me, I'm more like you in the sense that, I'm not so much in a rush to solution, but I'm more interested in solution than I am causation. But the only thing that balances it out for me is I used to work for government, so I understand that part of the process too. That they sort of over the years, they augment their permitting and zoning processes to accommodate industry, not people. And what we're saying now is we need a more people-centric approach because we see the byproduct of all of that fair policy. But anyway, one of the things that you talk about solutions. One of the solutions that I've recognized that has had a great deal of potential to it is this concept of green zones. And green zone strategy zones are not necessarily new because you have, prominent zones and empowerment zones, enterprise zones. There's zoning tools that are used all the time for very specific purposes. Historically, those purposes are usually around job creation and maybe addressing poverty and things of that nature. But the green zones are very intentional to include the concepts of environmental justice and climate justice and climate adaptation and fairness to communities that have been overburdened and stressed historically. And so the thing that's interesting about the green zone concept, you have, pilot projects in California and Minnesota. There are folks who have identified strategies by which you can address that historically stressed community and disincentivize additional stressors or additional burdensome practices in this already overburdened community as a subset of how you treat the zoning overall. So, for example, if you're able to convince legislators locally to establish green zones for a stressed community that's already have sufficient data of its burdens, then it can be a basis for preventing additional stressors from being permitted in that community. And some of these pilot programs have seen some success with that. And I'm even testing it out locally. Our planning commission, for example, received funds from Flood Ida and wanted to know, based on community input, what did we think or what did the public think could be done? And I said, oh, this is a great opportunity to talk about green zone. So I said, why don't you establish a green zone so that you would disincentivize burdening that community more, since you've already decided that they've been burdened enough, they've been flooded, right? So what else you want to do to them? And hopefully it gives us a basis of having language that would help to remediate some of those cumulative impacts. And see, the tricky thing about this stuff is, even looking at the ORD definition of cumulative impacts, in the past, they only dealt with what they call chemical and non-chemical stressors. But as community people, we know that the burdens on folks is more than just chemical and non-chemical. It's emotional, it's psychological, it's financial, it's all kinds of stuff stressing our people out. And until you could create a structure by which that conversation can be changed, then folks are going to be doing what they typically have always have done. And what I like doing is creating a whole new paradigm that creates new opportunities for discussion, new opportunities for not repeating the same old nonsense that we've been doing for the last 50 years. So, as a solution, I just think the green zone thing is something that I find pretty intriguing.
Yeah, just to mention that we came across something earlier this year where one of our most impacted communities, Brentwood, the city moved forward with putting yet another polluting industrial, bus terminal there. And of course, they didn't follow the laws. They didn't do an environmental impact study. And when we started questioning it, what came up was that the city had an exemption in place for enterprise zones, for economic development zones, that they didn't have to do environmental impact study and economic development zones. And so since then, we have been able to have that exemption removed, but it just it's like the exact opposite of what you're saying. And, to be honest, in many of the communities that have been termed economic development zones, we haven't seen much economic development for the community. We've seen a lot of pollution, and it's like been used as a justification excuse to allow certain things to happen. Doesn't mean that it's translated into jobs or economic improvement for people. So,
no, and I think you're absolutely right, and I think the big part of that is that we're reacting to initiatives that other people establish for their own interests, right? So yeah, we're not going to see the elegance in the process because there is no elegance in the process. They were not thinking about the people. They were not thinking about the impacts. They were not thinking about the output of burdens to public health. They weren't thinking about any of that. They were thinking about their bottom line. That's the reason why it's so important for us to have an alternative approach. When we stop, stopping the burden is one thing, but what's the alternative to it altogether? So I like the idea when we say, hey, let's stop that enterprise zone. Let's replace that enterprise zone with an eco zone or a green zone that has all of these best practices in place. And I think working on what those best practices look like, it almost functions like a community benefit agreement. You know what I mean? Whereas you got to see, here's the thing that's interesting, at least in my 30 plus years of doing this stuff. Some people are evil and some people are just stupid. And so they don't know what they don't know, right? They only know what they've been taught. And they've been taught that you're supposed to maximize the benefits to our shareholders, right? They've been trained that in business school. They got these great jobs. They do what they do. And I'm not mad at them. But we got a job to do now, and our job is equally as important. And our job is to create the maximum benefit for the community. And so we have to change the paradigm for what's important. And we can no longer ignore the value proposition of our environmental and climate work. So this is a special period for us because the value now of what we're doing is equal and if not greater than the value of people maximizing profits for their shareholders, because there's a cost to all of this stuff that people are paying. And when you start weighing and identifying what that cost looks like, it's nowhere in the world that the cost of some enterprise creating a few jobs so that people can claim that was the best use of that land or the best use of that public resource is no longer going to wash, right? Because when you measure it against the burdens, and it's our job, because I don't think they have necessarily the interest and or the resource to be able to do this. That's what we're doing. We're creating the data, we're creating the structure, we're creating the basis by which we can make those constructive changes. Because in theory of business, everything has a point of diminishing return, and they've reached it already.
I'd love to hear Shashandwa talk about your work.
Shonda, and just because I know we're working with the exact same stuff, and it may look a little, I know the purple air monitor is maybe a bit more compact. Something I'm really interested in hearing is like challenges you faced with getting site locations and how you've overcome that.
Yeah. So with our air monitors, we are hosting a lot of them at residents' homes who are super excited, residents that we've been with for a long time, who's been asking the questions around like, what is this doing to our health? What is it doing to our air? So it wasn't really, that hard to actually convince them to host it. We actually had more people willing to host it than we had air monitors. So, that's also an issue that you run into. I think another thing we were doing was trying to reach out to like, looking at like a point of access that's like at any location. Like, for example, BGE poles are like things that's like anywhere you go, you can like see a BGE pole. So they are like dominant like hotspots in communities that you can go to and that like are in good locations to collect data for you. So we do some air monitors on a pole that's close to the community. Sorry about the music if you guys hear anything, but so we done that. I think that was the location part was more easier for us, to be honest, because we had a lot of residents that's spread out throughout the community that were willing to host, and not only willing to host, but super excited to also hear back about the data. So we do that at like our community association meetups, talk about that data, what it means. And it's so cool that it's actually been matched with some of the questions, because a lot of the reason that we got the monitors like that really kicked it off was because we had an explosion at the open air coal pier that we have in Curtis Bay. Talked a lot about like the fact that the community is composed of like a medical waste incinerator, trash incinerator, landfill, open air coal pier, and over 70 to 100 different companies that's literally in the close vicinity of like the community. And so we got them, it was supposed to look at like the cumulative impacts, but also with the focus on like what is the chemicals that's being produced close to the coal. And so we have different locations around that. We even have one of them at it's a shop like for cars. That's an auto shop that's close by, that hosts one of the monitors. Because a lot of them feel the same way about these different companies that's the community and the harms they cause. So it's really, not that hard to convince them to do so. But I think we have been matching that again with some of the work that the students have done over the summer to answer that call of like the answer to that question is if coal is actually going off the terminal, how fast is it accumulating outside of the terminal, and then also they're doing some tape scripts within people's homes and then putting those in petri dish to send back to a lab that's looking at it to see if coal is on that script. So it's being matched with a lot of that because we're looking at a lot of accumulative impact. So like even if when those purple monitors come back with that data, those companies can say, well, you can't say that to me. You can't say that's only me, right? Because like it's so many of us here, you can't pinpoint that to me. Sure. So even matching that effort around the monitors, you have to match it with like, how do you prove that these companies are like responsible for what you're getting off of these monitors? And we're doing some pictures too. But I think in this community, it's just not enough to not have that data around, like, is it actually coal that people are complaining about? Is it actually this stuff? And so we have been doing a lot around that. And it's not to attack just the coal terminal by itself, but it's to use that as an interest for these other corporations that's in the community that's doing a lot of the pollution. And so we have been doing a lot of that. I'm not going to share too much information about the students because they're doing that tomorrow and they're super excited, so I don't want to reveal anything. But I think we have the air monitors alone, which we learned, it's not going to do it by itself. It's just not going to be enough to say like the pollution is happening. They know that's happening. Like all of the agencies we talk to know that this pollution is happening. But a lot of times it's like pinpointing it to these different companies to say like this is the company that's doing it. Now you have to hold them accountable. But that's really hard, again, when you have a cumulative impact in these communities that's structured to host all of these different industries that can't pinpoint where it's coming from. So, of course, we think the air monitors are good to show what's in the air, but we think it definitely got to be partnered with, like, proving, again, like, these companies are responsible for that. So that's what we do on that end around the air monitors. But I think, like, definitely just the station of them, we have relied a lot on residents. And residents also take the initiative to figure out other locations themselves. So, like once you get it out there, I think residents take that bar and keep it rolling because they are very like, not intrigued, but, interested to try to figure out what is in the air. And like, they're actually the best speakers from like just the mouth knowledge around the community where people want to host more air monitors and things like that. And get that data back. And we have also been working with the students who is actually doing a lot of also collecting that data. So they're doing some of that report back to community residents when they're talking with them. And just to like show, like even when because, a lot of us are working in partnership for the air monitor. So it might be with Hopkins, it might be whatever universities and things like that. So we have also just been taking initiative to learn how to like do a lot of what you're doing. So I try to figure out how do you actually read these monitors? How do you place these monitors? And then how do you report back about these monitors? Just in case those partnerships will ever die. Not saying they will, but just in case you can still keep that information going. And even if like, in our wildest dreams, the coal period disappear, you still have something else to do because it's still all these different companies. So we still have to learn how to like figure out how to use that. And then we've been also trying to, I think, to go back to somebody's question around like, what is the use once you get this data, right? Because you can collect all the data in the world, but what is the actual use for that data once it's formally collected? So we have been working a lot with like trying to get MDE to recognize first the data, which as like qualified data to say like this data is accurate. And then trying to figure out how do we actually work that into like, not just saying like this data is data, like we approve of this data, but how do you actually use this data when it comes time? And of course, that's really hard because a lot of these other things are still grandfathered in this way. Even if they did make new policies, you still got these different facilities, which we have like 7 to 100 that MDE recognized, but they're already grandfathered in. So it's still really hard. So I think we're just using that data also to try to protect from other industries from coming in and still figuring out the strategy to around like holding accountability to the ones that's still here. So that's what we've been doing a lot using the air monitors.
One question: when you said the BDE polls,
Are
Mhm.
you talking like the telephone lines?
Yeah, and they have like some other little like skinnier poles, but yeah, you can use those. Like if you can just you can ask them for permission, and they will do it, or you can talk with their city, and your city can also like give you access to different poles.
Oh, good luck doing that in Sussex County, Delaware.
No, hey, look, it's so great, crazy because in certain communities, some things work for them, and then in our community, things work for us, and then like other communities, like yeah, good luck with that. So,
Yeah, I was gonna ask all of you. Do you have like agreements with people, like letters, or well, first of all, do you anticipate taking the equipment back? One, and two, do you have any kind of like letter that you give folks to let them know that you'll maintain it, take care of it, and you want it back? How do you do that? How do just because I have 49 monitors we get ready to put out, and we've been going back and forth on whether we want people to keep them or not.
You know that, I mean, about getting them back, but among other things, right? About like
Yeah, right.
studies about, right? And like in our particular context, we have to be very careful on the Eastern Shore because depending on who you're talking to, like sometimes it's just better to say like, we're studying land uses here because your neighbors have complained about air quality. You get the right neighbor, it's okay to say, look, company X up the street, we need to go do something about this. You know, what's up? Can you help us? Right.
Right.
And like, but other people, you can't come say, we want to do something about poultry. They're going to be like, oh, no. My buddy has a poultry farm. I don't want to mess around with,
Right.
That has been difficult. And I think like, particularly being done through a university and having to follow all of the guidelines that come with that, like about it,
Sure.
the letter can almost be intimidating to where it's
Right.
like, your information could be identified if someone breaks our encrypted code that hides your address.
Right.
Which is like, is that really going to happen? Probably not. Do we have to disclose it on this scary letter? Yes. And I think that's
okay, because you had to do the IRB stuff, right? In terms
Mhm.
of
yeah, we all
what
did
you had to
that.
disclose to community. Okay, I see what you're saying.
But I think also again, if you can like alleviate some of that with like having those like residents that's very close knit to this that understands, and I think that goes back to what you're saying like, about like just like those residents that understand that also have the same issues and concerns with like the air. They're willing to actually host them, like they want to because they want to get that data back. And I think even that different language that you have to have from like these universities, you have to have that space to break it down to them. And explain to them. And I think just that level of trust in communities. I think that's why trust is so important when working with people, because when those residents see you all the time, when you're in the community, like they trust your word. You know what I'm saying? And I think also just by example, having just different like we have one also at our high school, right? So like it just seems like and those high schooler students in our class, they get to like go there, they get to check that monitor, figure out what it's doing, what it's saying, and things like that. So it's just become friendly, and they get to talk about that with their parents. And so then you have that other layer of just like that connection to those air monitors that doesn't feel so like frightful, like, oh my God, this is so scary, what does this mean?
See, Shoshana, you have an agreement too, or you said it's just not a big one like university type?
Yeah, I mean, but I think we do a lot of just like explaining to people more so, and then we leave. So we have partners with Hopkins, the same as like I'm pretty sure like we have the same partnerships with Hopkins, and so we also have like a person, like a partner that's from Hopkins that's like a part of the team who's always with us, that does that part. But then you have the team themselves, like the residents, that's able to like quickly come back and just be like, this is what that means, this is what this is, and it just seems more friendlier in that way, and they understand like the notion of what the equipment is for. They understand like how long they're going to have this equipment until whatever the agenda is. And they also, they get to like, some of the residents want to know how to read the equipment, or they want to see what it is about. And we do that because it just seems more friendlier to them to be able to understand it in that way. It doesn't seem so scary after that.
So since Purple Air is open source, you give people the link to connect online, right?
Just like certain partners, or we'll come with them and we'll show it to them on our own style, on our own iPads and things like that. And then they might ask questions like, what is this like? What does this mean? What does that mean? Right. Sure. And then like it's easier to explain that to them because once they understand that, it's not that scary.
Okay.
See, and there's go ahead. Sorry. Adam.
Could I just add something?
Yeah.
Vivek might be a good person to communicate with about this because he has developed MOUs with certain groups for his dissertation.
Mm.
And he might have something to contribute to the conversation.
Okay.
We're coming to the end of our conversation, and I have an observation that I would like you to think about, and that is that I'm trying to get my, oh, there, I can get my camera back. You all are much more animated when you're talking amongst yourselves than when you're at the match meetings. And I would just like to encourage you to, at the Tic Tac meetings and the match meetings, to be as assertive and animated as you are amongst yourselves. The dynamic is so different. I'm an objective observer, and I don't have any skin in the game. And this is not meant to be either a criticism, but
let me tell you what you're looking at, though, Paul. What you're looking at is you're looking at colleagues talking about the stuff that we do. When we're in meetings, we're sort of taking the lead of what you guys are doing structurally, which is a whole lot of something else. But
we're just trying to catch up.
Right.
I'm telling you.
Well, we know what we're doing because we're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a different dynamic, and you're right. It's not a negative or positive as much as it is. It's a different dynamic. When we do some things very, very well that you guys can't do, and you guys do some things that are better. Well, you do things different than what we do. But I think at the end of the day, you know, you'll find that as the relationship begins to mature, when we actually are doing projects and when we're actually engaging with the community, you'll understand why we were chosen. You know, because that's our expertise in what we do well.
Jerome, all I can say is I am in awe of all of you. Really. Mm-hmm. I am in awe of what you do day in and day out. Mm-hmm. And that's undisputable. And this symposium has only strengthened that feeling and thought. And that's why I began this meeting by telling you, please schedule me to come out. And I know that I need to give you my curriculum, and I'll do that. But I'll do that very soon. But right. What I'm saying is when Dr. Wilson and Dr. Hollis are talking about what you need to do on the Tic Tac and the match, and you don't say anything, or you say very little, I'm thinking, what is going on here? If someone was telling me what I needed to do in my life, I would definitely make a contribution. So all I'm saying is, Dr. Wilson respects you, obviously, or you wouldn't be there.
Right.
One of the things that has blown me away is reading the bios of the presenters and the moderators, and I'm really speechless because of and very hopeful, you know, that there are just so many people doing so many good things. This is an observation. The last thing I want to say is Sumaira has a QR code, I think, with regard to her book to show everyone. Do you have that, Sumaira? I didn't want to end the meeting without responding to some directive that I received.
And if you can email it, that would be great. Sorry.
Could you put a link or something in the chat or the email?
Yeah.
Because I like to buy some of your books, so I'll commit to buy.
I'll send it right now.
Okay.
I have it here.
Thank you, and again, congratulations. I have to get on the next plenary, so I have to check out.
Yes, thank you very much. And really, I look forward to working with you on your home turf very, very soon.
And I also congratulations to your book. And I'm so proud of like just the youth of this generation. You guys are doing some awesome work, man.
Beautiful. I double that. Congratulations.
Yeah, I want to come visit your city and see what you're doing in person.
Mhm.
So my last suggestion is that I really believe that all of you who are working with young environmental justice people, you should get together like this periodically, bi-monthly, quarterly, bi-yearly. Something. I think that all of your young people would benefit from getting to know one another.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely agree. I think we haven't done a book. Y'all did y'all but we have some lab research and things like that they learning. So I think they can share that. So I think that's pretty dope.
Yeah.
No,
they
but
can share what they're doing.
Your group
Your
group has done research, and I'm looking forward to the tour of Ivy City more than I am to the presentation of the Tic Tac when I go to Trinity Church.
Yeah, good. I hope many of you will be there.
Yeah, we're going to try to get there to Trinity on the 26th.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
I got to go, folks.
Yeah,
Thank you.
me too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Can you send out that QR code, Sumaira?
Yeah, I'm sending it actually right now. I've sent it. Right.
Did you email it or put it in the chat?
I emailed it.
Okay, great. Did you email it to me or all the participants? You're on mute.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was just talking with Walkyria here.
Oh, did you? Hello, Walkyria. Did you?
Hello.
did you email it to me or to all the participants, Sumaira?
I emailed it directly to you because I don't think I got the emails of everybody.
Okay, I'll forward it then. Okay, thank you. Great.
Well, thank you.
Am I gonna see you tomorrow?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.